In this video, I'm going to show how an evil startup used good UX design to make $1 billion. Coming up. Hey, this is Chris UX, and I'm going to show you how JUUL, an e-cigarette company, took an idea, went through the proper UX process to create a successful product, and turned it into $1 billion business. I was just on the internet, and the video was recommended to me. It was in my recommendations for like a week, but I finally checked it out. But we're going to briefly go through the video to show you the process they went through to how to use UX to have a successful product. And I had to do it under 15 minutes because I want to put this directly on LinkedIn. So let's get into it.
JUUL markets itself as an alternative to traditional cigarettes, and the e-cigarette giant says its mission is to improve the lives of the world's 1 billion adult smokers. It's not only former smokers that you're converting.
There's been a huge surge of high schoolers using e-cigarettes or vaping.
Well, the FDA calls it an epidemic.
Children's Hospital in Wisconsin is sounding an alarm about serious health problems linked to vaping.
You're nothing but a marketer of a poison, and your target has been young people.
You initially think you're saving the world, and then all of a sudden, like, people are saying, no, you're the devil.
In 2018, JUUL was a $38 billion company with an ambitious mission: to give the world's 1 billion cigarette smokers a better, healthier alternative. But just 5 years later, JUUL's value had plummeted 95% below its peak, and its mission statement now had an extra sentence: to combat underage usage of their products. Because despite JUUL's good intentions, they got millions of underage kids addicted and created a whole new generation of smokers.
That's wild.
This is the story of two young entrepreneurs who set out to destroy big tobacco, but who ultimately ended up becoming big tobacco. So get ready, because the rise and fall of JUUL is going to be a wild ride. In 2004, two product design students called Adam Bowen and James Monsees.
That stood out to me. He was the founders were two product designers. So that when your typical founders who just woke up with a great idea and just want to go straight to development, like they are already product designers, so they already knew the process of creating a product, a successful product.
Crossed paths at Stanford University. Stanford had banned smoking on campus over a decade ago. So during late nights in the design studio, Adam and James snuck out for a smoke break. And because they were both obsessed with design, they looked at their cigarettes and wondered if they could somehow be improved with technology. They realized that the reason many smokers couldn't quit despite the obvious health risks was because they missed the rituals associated with smoking. So Adam and James teamed up to design a product that kept the relaxing, social, and fun elements of smoking, but removed the most harmful aspects.
So they defined the problem, then they went on trying to solve it. So it wasn't like they just took a good idea and tried to push it to market. They found the problem and they were trying to solve the problem. And one thing I like about stories like this, you know, too often, like you think of solving a UX problem, you think you just throw a new app on it. But in this case, you know, you can't make an app for this. You know, you have to create something new and different outside of the phone, right?
Whilst doing research for their idea, Adam and James stumbled upon something fascinating. They uncovered thousands of emails, business plans, product research, and scientific studies, which revealed that big tobacco had secretly been playing with the idea of a safer cigarette since the early 1950s. For big tobacco, it wasn't ideal that their product kills their customers.
So they did UX research. Oh, really, the research is already done for them. They just had to just sort through it. So, like, not only they found a problem, now they went through a ton of research to help them solve that problem.
So they tried to make a cigarette that was just as addictive, but didn't cause cancer. They found that by heating the tobacco inside cigarettes into a vapor, the mix of chemicals produced in the smoke was less toxic than if they were to burn the tobacco completely. The research was promising, but big tobacco had run into a dilemma. Introducing a safer cigarette basically meant admitting that all regular cigarettes were unsafe. So to avoid destroying their own industry, they didn't release any products with this technology for decades. But Adam and James now picked up where Big Tobacco left off and decided to start their own business to work on this. There were 1 billion cigarette smokers in the world, and so Adam and James figured this was not only a way they could make obscene amounts of money, but also a way to save lives. What could go wrong? After graduating, Adam and James started their company, which they initially called Plume. The company's mission was to save 1 billion lives, so they genuinely believed that they were the good guys and that Big Tobacco was the enemy. By mid-2007, Plume had secured $400,000 in funding from investors, more than enough to hire employees and build a prototype.
So they received the money for they built a prototype for the product. So that just lets you know you can secure your funding for your startup without having an actual product to show them. Basically, they probably what they showed investors was they found, they discovered a problem, here's a solution, and here's the research to back it up, and then show how they can make a ton of money from it, basically. And basically all you need is to show an investor, because they give you the money to actually make the product. So you don't need to take an idea and go straight to development. Just showing that you have a good idea for a product, that you can validate it by research, and how the investors can make their money, you get your money.
But from the start, they ran into several issues. Firstly, the early prototypes of the Plume were faulty, and one of them exploded inside the office. And secondly, it seemed like Adam and James's idea for a safer cigarette had competition. Similar products were already coming to the market. The first e-cigarette to get any real attention was called Enjoy, and soon the vaping industry was taking flight.
To me, this further validates the idea.
Adam and James weren't too worried by the competition. Most vapes were big, tacky, and complicated to use, whereas Adam and James were design geeks and put a lot of thought into the product design. And so when the Plume was ready to ship in 2009, it was a pretty sleek looking product. Unfortunately, as good as the Plume looked, in practice it had lots of issues. It still shocked or burned people sometimes, and to fuel it, you had to manually fill a cartridge with butane, which is basically lighter fluid, so it was highly flammable. In other words,
I feel like that's when you hop straight into your UI without fully fleshing out your UX process. You have something that looks good but not functional.
it was complicated and dangerous. And not just that, people would often tape 2 plumes together just to get a higher nicotine dose, which was a clear sign that the product wasn't doing its job very well. It simply wasn't as satisfying as a cigarette. So basically, smokers thought the Plume was interesting, but it wasn't going to change the world. To Adam and James, the Plume's failure was devastating. Years with relatively little success. And thus, the company was now in crisis. They came to the depressing realization they needed to start over from scratch. And that would lead to a new product that they would call the JUUL.
Another thing to learn from this. So when the product failed, instead of scratching the whole idea, they pivoted to something better.
To become successful, the JUUL needed to improve on both major aspects of the Plume, design and engineering. So on the design side, James focused on making the JUUL a tech product. It had to be subtle, minimalistic, and intuitively easy to use. To achieve that, he gave the JUUL a modern design with just 2 parts, a body and a pod. Because of the way these were shaped, everyone instantly knew exactly how they fit together. Over on the engineering side, Adam focused on solving the fundamental problem of user satisfaction. You see, the JUUL had to be strong enough to satisfy cigarette smokers, but currently that was impossible. The pure nicotine which was added to vape liquids is naturally bitter, so if Adam matched the nicotine content of a cigarette, the taste was intolerable. But then Adam discovered tobacco industry research on nicotine salts, which dampen the taste of nicotine, burn the throat much less, and can be loaded with pretty much any flavoring. Because of this, Adam could amp up an e-liquid's nicotine content to the point where it was actually stronger than a cigarette, smoother, and tasted of something nice like mango or creme brulee. And so, as Adam and James reflected on the new product they'd made, they realized they'd done something remarkable. They had essentially reinvented smoking. You see, before the JUUL, the cigarette was the holy grail of all products. Not only are they easy and cheap to manufacture, but the nicotine inside can be as addictive as heroin, so you normally have a customer for life. But of course, the fatal flaw of cigarettes was the health impact on their customers. However, since JUUL didn't contain tobacco, people generally believed the JUUL was a safer alternative to cigarettes. And from a business perspective, the JUUL could be an even more lucrative product. Whilst the JUUL kept all the positive aspects people associated with cigarettes, nicotine salts were far more powerful than tobacco, so it was even more addictive. Plus, a JUUL could also be used indoors without leaving a horrible smell behind. And while cigarettes burn out, a JUUL could be pulled out and put away instantly, meaning people could smoke anywhere, all day if they wanted to. And not just that, the JUUL was cool. It had a bunch of flavors, and it looked like something Apple would make. In fact, people later called it the iPhone of e-cigarettes. So naturally, Adam and James were incredibly excited about the JUUL. JUUL realized this was turning into a teenage epidemic. They completely changed their advertising strategy so it didn't appeal to minors. But the damage was already done. And so JUUL was in a terrible position when they faced their next challenge. The 2 years since the FDA made their first push towards regulating e-cigarettes were coming to an end. And now JUUL had to undergo a process where they essentially had to prove their product was a net public health benefit to the United States. Given that millions of kids were getting addicted to JUULs at the time, they would have a hard time proving that was the case. A report came out claiming an 80% increase in vape use in high schools, and almost a 60% increase in middle schools. More than 3 million high school students had taken up the habit, so around 1 in every 5 high school students was vaping, and JUUL was by far the most popular brand. So the FDA sprung into action and forced JUUL to provide their internal documents for review. Around this time, JUUL also drew the attention of Altria, the biggest cigarette manufacturer in the US. In the first quarter of 2018, cigarette sales had fallen more than what Altria's models suggested they should have, and they blamed this exclusively on JUUL replacing cigarettes. Whilst Altria had launched its own e-cigarette, JUUL sales were far ahead of them and doubling every 3 months. Altria considered this a genuine threat to their entire business. But as the pressure on JUUL intensified due to the negative media attention and the FDA review, the company was in a vulnerable position, and Altria saw this as an opportunity. They figured if you can't beat them, buy them. So in December 2018, Altria executives met with JUUL executives. Rumors began circulating around the company, and on the 20th of December, it was officially announced. Altria was buying a 35% stake in JUUL in exchange for a $12.8 billion investment, valuing the company at over $38 billion. Thanks to the stock they owned, JUUL's founders Adam and James became billionaires overnight. But all the JUUL employees were thinking the exact same thing. They were now working for the enemy.
So you see how they had an idea, they did the research, they validated the idea, they found the problem they were solving, they kept reiterating the product until they had something successful, and they took something as evil as e-cigarettes and it's targeting with a good product targeting to an underage crowd that went viral, turned into $1 billion business. And so just letting you know, I mean, I thought this was a perfect video to show how important UX design is to the success of our product. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.